We're going to get started on a project here where we've got this overgrown yew in front of the house. Now this is fairly common. You know, you either buy a house or you just have shrubs that get ahead of you. The challenge with evergreens is once you get to a certain point, you can't go back to the ground like you can with a deciduous shrub and start them over. You're a little bit limited on how far you can go back. So the decision's been made here to actually take this out, and we're going to re-landscape this entire area. But I thought it'd be a good time to say, well, how much can you prune back? We don't care what the results are. So we're going to go ahead and just do that project where we're going to go back, and I'm going to go through and I'm going to do thinning cuts where I take out some of these higher arching branches, and we'll see how much we can get away with by reducing the overall size and still save the form. If we were to go way back in here, say half the shrub, we've destroyed the look of this plant completely. So we're not going to go that far, but let's see how far we can get without ruining the appearance. All right, so if we take a look in there, what we're trying to do is create a natural curved shape, but yet hide those cuts where you can't see them, where they don't stick out like a sore thumb. So we're leaving part of that lateral branch as we prune back in. We started to get a little bit more aggressive through here, and we left a little bit of a tunnel just to illustrate how this is going to turn out. Now, so you can probably, before you get into some really ugly wood, get about 1/3 of this overall plant at the most before you really start seeing a lot of those branch cuts, which are unsightly. Now, the thing to mention on this, once you do bring it back 1/3, if that's your choice, you are going to get some good repeat flush of growth in the spring, which will cover up those stubby cuts fairly quick. So you've got that option to live with that stubby cut early on and let that new growth come over. And at that point, that's when you're going to want to make sure you start maintaining that shrub, you know, on a consistent basis. We went ahead and went one step further and sheared back as much as we could, just to give you an idea of what you'd be up against. So with evergreens, you're limited to that 1/3 point. We're going to go ahead and we're going to take this out, but now you have an idea that if you've got an overgrown shrub, this is about how far you can go back, at least on a yew. Let's go ahead and cut this to the ground. The first thing I'll mention, when you start cutting back a shrub like this, don't worry about trying to get all the way to the ground. You're never going to get in there. You've got to start a little bit higher just to get some working room. We're going to start with a hand saw. Might switch over to the chainsaw depending on the angles, but this is sometimes the most difficult part about it, is just finding an entry point to get in there. One thing I will mention on this type of saw, these things are going to pop out of that branch quickly. Man, are these sharp. Even knowing how quickly I can cut myself, I've done it many times over the years. So you're probably saying, maybe I should have gloves on. And maybe you're right, I probably should. We'll bounce back and forth. If you don't have tension on that branch, it's very difficult to saw. So occasionally we're going to have to get in there on those smaller, more flexible branches with the loppers. Once we get an opening on one side, we'll just work our way through, clearing all the branches as we go. Now, I will mention here, we're not planning on taking this entire stump out. We're just going to cut the branches all the way to the ground, and we're planning on landscaping over the top with some field stone, different riprap rock. Now, if you are going to take the stump out, one thing you can do, leave those branches about 18 inches to 2 feet up. That's going to give you some leverage or something to wrap a strap or a chain on, and you can either pull that stump out, or when you're pulling on that stump, it puts tension on those backside roots. The shovel's going to cut through it a lot more quickly if you've got some tension on it. This can be a bit of a process, getting a shrub like this out of here, as the branches are mangled and gnarled together. So it's a combination of sawing. If you've got one that's hung up, sometimes you're just going to have to go in and cut it apart. The U's have pretty soft wood, so a handsaw actually works quite well. I've done a little bit of chainsaw work in here, but the angles are difficult. A lot of room for snapback potential too when you've got this many soft twigs. We're getting close. Got most of the main trunks cut back. We'll start cleaning up some of these smaller branches. We are down to the stumps here. You can see quite a difference how we open this whole thing up. So you can open up a can of worms when you start doing a project like this. We've got a tremendous amount of old needles and debris here. We'll have to decide if we're gonna clean that up with a blower. We might be able to landscape right over the top of it with our rocks or riprap that we're gonna do. So we'll see, let's go ahead. We're gonna cut these stumps down as low as we can go. I tell you what, just when you think you've got the worst part done, cutting back all those branches, boy, it's a mess under here. Look at all that debris. Branches, rock, old needles. Yeah, we got some cleanup ahead of us here. I'll mention too, we've used a couple different tools here. The chainsaw, got a sawzall with a blade, but I tell you what, when you get this many needles that have built up, and then we've got that landscape rock underneath, you can really go through some blades quickly when you hit that rock. So we're gonna finish up some of those with the loppers. We're actually just kind of pulling those branches up and then we're cutting them that way. We've got a big one left buried in the rock. Once we can get that up a little higher, then we can go ahead, go in there, maybe use the power tool. I still think it's a little bit easier than taking out the whole stump. What happens when you come in here and you try to remove that entire stump is you've got a crater. Now you've got to bring in fill. You're going to have a settling problem. By doing this, we're going to go ahead, and like I said, we're going to put some new plantings in here. We're going to cover these stumps up with some different riprap stone. You'll never know they were there. So there we go. We've got our overgrown evergreen shrubs removed, really opened up the house nice. Next step, it's going to be, we'll go ahead and we'll do the landscaping through here with some new riprap and new plantings. I appreciate you watching this garden hike. We'll see you again next time.